Hey everybody, it's Nancy A. Shenker, and I am the geezerproofer. And today, my guest is me. So I'm on episode number 28, and what I've been doing once a quarter is recording solo. And I do that for a couple of reasons. I always like to just have a little something extra in the can in case guests bail on me. But also, it's just a good opportunity for me to kind of flex my narcissistic personal brand muscle and challenge myself to just talk to you, the audience, directly. You could either listen on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, or you could watch me on YouTube or in Vimeo. And it was interesting because today I'm going to talk about the 5 main things that I've been mulling over or ruminating on over the past few weeks. So my theme in April has been what I call spring cleaning. And it's not just spring cleaning your house, it's spring cleaning your life. And different from January when we all make resolutions, it's a time when we can look at the first quarter of the year and say, all right, what did I do? What didn't I do? And what am I going to do differently in the months ahead? And because it's spring, the weather's getting nicer. Theoretically, we're all a little bit more optimistic. It's a fresh beginning. So here goes. These are the 5 things that I've been thinking about as I go through this spring cleaning process. The first is related to this podcast. This morning, I met with Kelly Brink, who is my marketing person for Pod Populi, where I record my podcasts. And we went through the data of which of my episodes is performing really well and which ones are performing less well and how I'm doing overall, because I'm about halfway through the year in my podcast recordings. Interestingly, the most popular podcast to date was one I did with my friend Matt Caldwell, who is in his 20s, and we talked about differences and similarities across generations, and specifically about something that he and I both do, which is sometimes go on dates in other states, what we call destination dating. So I think it was a combination of the topic. I think it was also that he has a huge social media following and generously shared our episode with his followers as well. So as I get into the second half of the year and record more podcast episodes, I'm really trying to get a handle on what's working. And I tend to be a little bit of a data geek, so it was great to actually go through the data. And if any of you were interested in being a guest on my podcast, or you have a topic that you'd like me to cover, please just email me at thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. And just again to clarify, because I do sometimes get pushback, a geezer is somebody who's set in their ways, who's adverse to change, who's not curious about the world. And a beezer is somebody who be in the moment, be curious, be active. So I did write a blog this weekend about change and change aversion, because I do meet a lot of people over 50 who are kind of miserable in all or some aspect of their lives, but they're resistant to change, either out of fear of the unknown. It's just very comfortable getting into certain habits. So April, spring cleaning month, is a great time to really de-geezer yourself and make change in those areas where you're not really happy or you think you could do better. So number 1, the thing that I'm thinking about is my podcast itself. And number 2 is, as I just said, change and what kind of change we are capable of after 50. And all the scientific evidence really points to the fact that there's this thing called neuroplasticity, which means that your brain can actually change as you get older. You can learn new skills. You can develop at a different rate than you've been developing at. The whole notion that older people are slow is actually a misconception, because the more experience we have doing certain things, the faster we may become. So think about those things in your life that you might want to change, or if you're 100% happy with everything in your life, that's a great thing. Keep on doing what you're doing, but don't be afraid to change. Think about what you might want to do differently and just make baby steps that'll get you closer to that change. So number 3 is tech and AI. everywhere you look, you are reading about AI. Some people say it's the death of our society and humanity as we know it, and the robot overlords will be governing everything. And there are people like me who just look at AI as the next natural evolution of technology. So, as I've said before, I started college with a manual typewriter and then upgraded to an IBM Selectric. And now I do a lot of work on my phone or on my laptop. So technology has made our lives easier, more portable, more ubiquitous, one of my favorite words. And I view AI as an assistant, not a replacement. And I believe that those of us who are going to rule the world, to be that bold, are those of us who view AI as an assistant as opposed to something that's going to take over our lives. Great example, I use Grammarly to correct my spelling and my grammar as I write. I don't accept all of its edits. I sometimes will give a prompt to a graphic design program to make something for me, but then I still have to go in as the human and fine tune. As a writer, I have used ChatGPT, but honestly, it's faster for me to just write from scratch, maybe using ChatGPT for research. But ChatGPT currently, and I'm not saying it's always going to be this way, but it currently lacks humor and nuance and subtlety, and that's something that only a human can provide. So if you're afraid of technology, if you're afraid to make that change, just dabble, and you may find that it makes your life much easier. You could do things faster. I always use the analogy of if you were given a choice between a squeegee mop and a bucket, or a Roomba or a vacuum cleaner, what would you pick? And think about it in terms of work and life in the same way. The technology, if used properly, can save you time, save you money, help you do things faster, and maybe even make you a little bit smarter. Number 4, and this is something that many, many people and the tabloids and the TV stations have all been buzzing about. It is The Golden Bachelor. And I've written about the series for my Substack column, which is called The Silver Hair Playbook, which deals primarily with dating after 50. So I've been following the entire series, and from the get, I really felt that Jerry Turner, the Golden Bachelor, saw this as an opportunity to become a personal brand. He took full advantage of all the opportunities that were given to him: celebrity gatherings, celebrity pickleball tournaments, appearances on TV shows, red carpet events. And I kind of got the sense that Teresa, who's the woman he subsequently married and is now divorcing after 3 months, had a very, very different view of the relationship. Her body language, the way she clinged to his arm and looked up at him when he spoke, this is just one woman's opinion, that he was very much on a path to become a personal brand and all the perks that came along with that. She, on the other hand, probably was looking for a husband and her happily ever after. So why should any of us care about this bullshit reality TV show? I think it speaks to the fact that we're living in a world today where becoming a personal brand has become more and more important to a lot of people. I once saw this shocking statistic that something like 75% of high school students want to grow up to be social media influencers. So I personally don't think that that's a real career. We're living in a world that very easily loses interest in some of these reality TV characters. So pursuing a life in which you are just a personal brand, where there's no stake that goes along with that sizzle, you're going to have your 15 minutes of fame, you're going to get all the free stuff, you're going to appear on all the shows, and then somebody else may come along that's cooler, more interesting, more dramatic than you are, and you're going to be bumped. So as far as I'm concerned, being a personal brand and a social media influencer is really not a life goal. And it ties back in some ways to number 1 and why I'm doing this podcast. I'm doing the podcast. Yes, eventually I would like to monetize it, but my primary objective is inspiring, educating, motivating people of my age, maybe making them laugh sometimes, maybe making them think. But my goal is not purely fame and fortune. On the flip side, there are people who evaluate the success of their podcast based on the number of listeners, which clearly is important. But I am more concerned with having quality influencers and not embarrassing my children and being my real, genuine self as opposed to a contrived character. So let's see if I can keep that up and live to that mission. So that really does tie back to the Golden Bachelor and how we have become this society of contrived brands where people don't necessarily have talent or substance, but they get viewership and that makes them insta-famous. So let's now get back to talking about reality. And a topic that I do cover both in my series and on this podcast is dating after 50. And yes, I am still single. I've been single, meaning not in a relationship at all, for roughly 3 years. And some of my friends will tell me that I need to change my list of requirements and I need to settle, which I just flat out refuse to do. I think that the challenge of friendship and relationships after 50 is that, yes, we are kind of set in our ways, but we also have a certain set of standards that we're looking, at least in my case, that I'm looking to stick to. I've already been married. I've had a house in the suburbs. I've had my kids. And at this stage in my life, I'm really looking for somebody who is funny, smart, genuine, and wants to explore, make change, travel the world. So if any of my listeners out there know somebody, send him my way. And worst case, I will die single. And when people hear me say that, they say, oh, that is horrible. But my mother died single at 95, and she was happy because she just refused to settle. So I'd like to end on an upbeat and happy note as opposed to an image of me like Miss Havisham in the Dickens novels, dying alone in a house full of stuff. I don't think that's going to be the case. I am always open to change. I'm open to exploration. And that is the key to being a beezer and not a geezer. So after this episode, think about your own life. Think about what you might want to change. Think about the kinds of people you might want in your life. And think about if you'd like to be a guest on my podcast. Again, it's thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. And feel free to listen to any of my episodes. There are going to be a lot more cool ones coming up in the months ahead. And thank you all for continuing to listen. And remember, be a beezer, not a geezer. Peace out.